All right, we're moving into our third period. This is coming towards the end of the Old Testament. This is the return. So we had a united royal kingdom, then a divided kingdom, and then an exile that kind of left off with like, is there some hope at all? And then there is. 70 years later, there's a return. The color is yellow. It's brighter days for the Jews. The main books are Ezra and Nehemiah, as you can see in some of the secondary supplementary books, Esther, Malachi. And we look at the particular topics that we'll cover here, the main events, if you will. Zerubbabel, I love that name, Zerubbabel. Say it with me, Zerubbabel rebuilds the temple. Zerubbabel rebuilds the temple. Ezra, the prophet, Ezra, returns and teaches. Nehemiah returns and rebuilds the wall. The temple, the teaching, or the Torah, the scriptures, and the city walls are the heart of Jewish identity. So when they leave exile, it's like you lost yourself, you lost your way. The return is to restore their identity. So those are the three things that the prophets who return with people back to Jerusalem, that's what they first do. And we end with the story of Esther. Let's take a look. Here it is. We're gonna do Act 1 first, and then Act 2 down here, and then Act 3 and some commentary at the end right here. Okay, so let's start with Act 1. We have the prophet Zerubbabel who returns to rebuild the temple. There's like my little picture here. The people who are exiled remember how awesome the first temple was. It would have been considered one of the marvels or wonders of the world. The new temple that they will rebuild is so almost incomparable. No, that's not the right word. It's nothing compared to what the temple used to be. However, all the records we have of the time of Jesus, that temple was impressive itself. But the prophets in rebuilding the temple are leading people towards a new era, a new view of the world, that it isn't the glory of the building that matters, but it is a recommitment of the heart to God. Okay, let's move to Act 2. Act 2, there's Ezra, who reclaims the Torah, which was lost to the people while they went into exile for 70 years. They lost their story. Literally, they had no pages of the text with them. So Ezra returns and he reclaims the Torah and he begins teaching the people again. And then Act 3. Nehemiah returns with the last wave of refugees and rebuilds the wall. You can't have a space identifiably as yours without walls. And so they knew that they had to rebuild the walls because they were surrounded by foreign enemies. And not just enemies with swords, but enemies with foreign religions that wanted to infect them and invade them and make them worship the god that these pagan idol gods of statues and stones. And it was kind of a miraculous thing. But the walls and gates, this is all part of their identity. And they ended up rebuilding it in 52 days. And so that was like a remarkable movement, recognizing that in order to complete a restoration of identity, they need protection so that they can kind of rebuild. All right, so let's look at these events very quickly. Over here at the bottom, this return period is similar to the Exodus event. In the Exodus, as well as in this period, the people are returning from a pagan land. Remember, in the Exodus, they were in Egypt, and they're going to the Promised Land. In both periods, people are returning. People are invited and given the freedom to worship. If you remember the Exodus period, we said that Moses initially demanded that the people be set free for 3 days so that they can step outside of Egyptian territory, learn to worship their God, and then come back. The same story happens that the King Cyrus tells the Jews that they can go back, and they're invited. They're going back so that they can rebuild their temple, their identity, reclaim their teaching, and remember what it means to worship. Next, it's a reminder that God wants our heart, our whole heart, not just a small piece of our heart. Next, there's also like key leaders who are like Moses. So there's a little picture of Moses in the covenant, and then it says Ish. So they're Moses-ish. They're like Moses. They each do something that Moses did. They bring the people. They like Moses brought the mobile temple with them, the Ark of the Covenant. Moses brought down the 10 Commandments and started teaching them, and Moses ultimately protects them on their journey through the desert to the Promised Land, and helps kind of rebuild their identity even before the walls showed up. Okay, and lastly, like right down here, second to last, right here, it says pure Judaism. Okay, that's the symbol of the Star of David. Pure Judaism, not Judaism plus random other mixing of religions. God wanted them to have a pure faith. Okay, and lastly, it was a return to Torah, return to the Torah, return to the teachings that Ezra reclaimed. It was a reminder that love equals obedience, that we can't say we love God unless we actually listen to him and do what he says. And that is it for the period of the return. See you in the next period.